Welcome to the Natural Genius podcast. We're here to help you tap into your natural genius. Let's go. Kelly Wendorf sounds like an absolutely extraordinary human being. She describes herself as having worked around the world, studied with many spiritual and Indigenous leaders in India, Africa, Indonesia, and Australia. She's a coach to senior executives and leaders, a published author, a motivational speaker, a systems change and leadership mentor, a disruptor, a socially responsible entrepreneur. She has done so much in her life, and she also has stories about working from her ranch as well in the US. My connection to Kelly is I've been introduced to her through Bob Randall. I hope you've caught her Natural Genius conversation by now, who describes Kelly as a treasure, and I, as always, am looking forward to hearing of another's natural genius. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Kelly, welcome to the Natural Genius podcast. It is such a pleasure to be together.
Yeah, it's great to be here. There's just a lot of energy and it feels really positive and amazing. And hi, all of your community.
Oh, you're the best to say that. I think you might be the first person to say that. That's so cool. Hi, everyone. And Kelly, before we started, I can see it now, the frame of Uncle Bob in the back behind you there. How divine.
I have this really beautiful altar here behind me in my office, and then I have this beautiful Bob that I took, and he's always with me, and he's always with us, right?
Oh, well said. I always feel like he's giggling with us. I always feel that lovely lightness of being and sweetness. And obviously with you and me being introduced through Auntie Barb, it's such a beautiful connection. And tell me some stories about your friendship with her and Uncle Bob. I would love to hear.
Yeah, I love to tell stories, and for because we're sharing this podcast with my community. Annie Barb is Barbara. That's how many of them know her, but she is the wife of Uncle Bob and lifelong companion. And but I met Uncle Bob before Annie Barb seen. So the story is that I can't remember what year it was, but I was pregnant with my third child. And I was overseas. At the time, during my pregnancy, I was working on my first book, which is a anthology of stories on belonging. And I wanted to collate stories from all over the world, how different people and different writers and authors think about this idea of belonging. And the idea came to me because I'm from northern New Mexico and born and raised in Santa Fe, and I was living in Australia for 20 years. And when I would come home to northern New Mexico, I always felt this like ache for returning back to these mountains that I love so much. Even though I loved Australia, I loved being there and I loved raising my kids there. And so that provoked an essay, which then a publisher found and said, could you please do a book on belonging? So I said yes, and I was busy gathering different pieces and different essays from different authors. And I went overseas while I was pregnant. And while I was in France, I miscarried very late miscarriage. So it was very dramatic. I called my midwife in Australia and I just knew it was happening. And she said, giving birth is natural and losing a baby is also natural. And you just need to allow the process to happen. Go to some cafe, have a glass of wine and just, which I did. And it was very profound. There wasn't rushing off to the hospital. The baby came. We swaddled the baby in clothes, and we had a little pastry box to put the baby in. And we found some flowers. We were near Notre Dame, so we found some flowers on some bushes, and we sent her down, the scent. And it was quite devastating. And all of this is to build up to Uncle Bob, because not too much later, a few days later, we were in the UK, and I started to hemorrhage, and it was dangerous. Like, I was dying, actually. I was losing a lot of blood, and so they rushed me to the hospital, and and when I was put under anesthesia, I had a dream, one of these dreams you have that is not a dream. And all these grannies, all these ancient Aboriginal grannies came around me with rattles, and they were singing, and they had sticks. And, I had never had much experience with Aboriginal Australia at the time. In those days, the peas didn't touch the carrots. It was very hard as a white Australian, anybody, to meet an Aboriginal.
The peas didn't touch the carrots. And had you had other experiences with Indigenous folk in other lands before
Yes,
that?
Native American folks here, and also Ethiopia. I had in many different cultures, but for some reason, Australia was just kind of, I don't know, sanitary, that we didn't have that. And so it was very strange for me to have this dream of these grannies, and they're kind of singing me back to life. And it was a very strong experience, this losing the baby and nearly dying. And I think it interrupted my life. If you were to draw my life, I think it was a big sort of interrupt moment. And a couple of days later, I was in a cafe, and there was a poster of Uncle Bob's film, Canini, on the wall. And, if I hadn't lost the baby, if I hadn't nearly died, I would not be in this cafe looking at that poster. And I sort of thought, he needs to be in my book. I wonder how I'm going to get in touch with Bob Randall. And
what a great story, Kelly.
Out loud.
It's a heartbreaking story, as well as a great story in terms of the lead into Uncle Bob.
Yeah. It's amazing. So, the fact that I had to go to France, go to the UK to meet Uncle Bob, So I get back to Australia. I have forgotten that in sort of the haze, I'd forgotten this intention, and somehow somebody somewhere scrawled on one of these sticky notes his phone number. And I think, okay, I'll just call Bob Randall. He doesn't know who I am. And I remember the place. I remember, and I dialed the number, and my heart's beating, because I'm anyway awkward socially. You wouldn't think I am, but I am. And he picks up the phone.
Me too.
He picks up the phone, and he says, "I've been waiting for you to call me."
Oh my gosh, like with Honey Bob as well. There's parallels with both of your stories. Oh,
yeah. So I kind of introduced myself, and I've got this book, and it's stories on belonging. And would you be willing to begin this book? And he says, I've been wanting to tell my story, and you're who I need to tell my story to. And he says, we need to meet. I need to talk to you. I'll meet you at Sydney Airport on Saturday. Click. That's all he says to me. That's it. There's no email. It's just, I'll meet you on Saturday at Sydney Airport. So I'm like, okay. So I take the earliest flight from Brisbane, or where am I? Whatever, Brisbane to Sydney. And I'm sitting at the airport going, well, I guess I'll see him. somewhere, somehow, at some point in the day. And I had made an arrangement with an Airbnb to be there for 3 nights. I mean, I don't know Uncle Bob. I don't know what I'm getting into. He flies in from Uluru.
Kelly, sorry to interject. So your background, as you just described before, having been around other Indigenous leaders,
yeah.
Do you think that possibly opened you to, for some others might be like, that's a mad idea, jumping on a plane and then just hanging around an airport. Do you think that you have that natural open, like, readiness?
Yes, I think so. But when I was in it, it's not like I felt confident that, like, oh, I can just do this. I felt like I was like, what am I doing? This is insane. Everyone's like, what are you doing?
The duality of the human.
And 3 nights with a man that you all alone, that you like. So, I mean, so yes.
What a pleasure.
So, yeah. And so he arrives, and I recognize him. I don't know how he recognizes me. And he right away, like the very minute I say, hi, Uncle Bob, I'm Kelly, he just starts going. He just opens his mouth, and he is talking about how, like, it was wild. Like, we're looking for his baggage, and he's talking to me about what happens when people die, and we're on the shuttle bus, and he's talking about how thoughts are energy, and therefore energy creates matter, and if you don't, like, he's just downloading, and I'm like, I don't have my tape recorder on. Anyway, it was wonderful. And he spent 3 days in this Airbnb in those days we had tape recorders and a microphone.
Oh, wow.
And a microphone in front of him. And he just talked. He just talked and talked and talked and talked. And at some point we took a break, and he starts talking about the super collider on the news. Remember, in France, there's the super collider. And he's just musing at the fact that they're hurling these particles so fast to create the Big Bang. And he's just laughing so hard at the absurdity of, like, is that dangerous? I mean, should we be concerned that we're creating the Big Bang in France? And I don't know. We had that started a lot of
multi-dimensional conversations across many topics.
Absolutely multidimensional. My life has forever changed from that moment, and I get emotional thinking about it, because he was a teacher, he was a friend, and he came into my life at a time when I was I can't say it was exactly lost. Maybe you could say I was lost. I had, I was coming up on another failed marriage. I just lost a child. I had really lost my religion in a way. I'd really lost my faith in spirituality, and because I'd seen all the corruption and just shadow darkness in the guru world, and I was really kind of, what is this all about, and he eventually took me back to the wild horses, not on that trip. Obviously, we were in Sydney, but there was a time I went to Uluru, and he picks me up. He's not talking to me. This is again before Barb. And, he picks me up from Uluru. He hands me a bottle of water. We start driving. I don't know where we're going. I don't know why we're going there. And I don't know why he's not talking to me. So I'm again like, what's going on, and why is am I going to be like some statistic out in the desert, dead? Like, what's going on here? And after like 3 hours, I finally like chill, and he looks over, I'm finally right, like, to stop. And he looks over at me and he goes, "It feels better, doesn't it?" Yes, this feels better. But where he was driving me, and he didn't know I was a horsewoman. He didn't know I was lost. I didn't talk to him about all this stuff. I was busy recording his stuff. I didn't share with him about everything. And he takes me out bush. We're sleeping under the stars in swags. Wild camels are walking around us at night. And he takes me to a billabong, and all these wild horses come. And he just turns to me and says, when you're lost, you go back to where the lostness started. And I think he intuited that. Anyway, my spirituality is my horses, are my horses. And they're my teachers and always have been my teachers. And I believe that they are conduits to some realms and intelligences that we cannot even comprehend. They're happy to play dumb for us. No, they are. That's how compassionate they are, right? It's like, okay.
I'm laughing because I've had an experience recently where I can completely relate to those words. But please keep talking. This is absolutely fascinating, Kelly. Thank you so much.
Sure. I mean, you open up such a great space where things just pour forth. So thank you. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Tell me more about horses and this beautiful perspective of coming back to where it all started. Yeah, tell me more. I think, and also tell me about some growing up around horses, like a bit of the origin and context.
Well, the horse, they really do. I mean, they will be, they're livestock. They're happy to be livestock. If that's how we want to meet them, like there's that much grace and compassion that they have that, okay, you push cows, we'll push cows. But if you are willing to sit with them like you would an elder, right? Like you would a mother tree, or then some veils part and something else shows up. And people say that, like, if you go to the pyramids, right, and you hang out with a tourist group, that's one experience. But if you were to go there alone or be there in a small group and just sit still with it, then all this stuff comes. So horses are like that. Like, they'll just be there and just do what you think, for the cameras or whatever. But there's something that they offer, some portal to some kind of intelligence that is subtle, but absolutely there. And I mean, I grew up with horses. I grew up in the conventional approach to horses, just like so many of us. And the conventional approach was very power over. I thought I was loving them. I wasn't loving them. I mean, love is not, we think the felt sense of affection is love. And that's not love. Love is a verb. Love is how you give yourself to another. Love is how you put yourself aside and be of service to another. And that's an action. Feelings of affection to my horses, but was I listening to them? Was I paying attention to what they needed, or was I just getting my way as I was taught, right? So around the time of meeting Uncle Bob, I also met a horse who was my horse, who wasn't willing to just go along with those rules. And so I had a choice. I could either change me and restore that relationship, or continue trying to change him, probably at my peril, right? So
tell me more. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. So he was a traumatized horse. He was a big black Frisian cross. Frisians are just these gorgeous horses with these long manes and these black long tails, but a very big horse, and sort of towered over you. And he you just couldn't coerce him. And probably because he was so traumatized. And, I'd just been taught, it's all by stick and carrot, pretty much. You're bribing with the carrot, and you're coercing with the stick, and you're asking the horse to do this thing and the other thing. And if they don't, there's trouble, and your horse better comply. And I mean, it's the story of humankind, right? It's what we do to women and children and all of each other. And because horses are such big creatures, people, I think, really feel like they have to apply a lot of pressure and force to be safe around them, and you don't. They're incredibly psychic and sensitive and nuanced and complex. And so I had, the relationship could go as far as it could go. And I had a daughter who we got her a pony, and we lived in Mullumbimby, Australia. And she said, "Mommy, I don't want to learn how to ride horses in the way that you ride horses." Okay. She was like in all of her 5-year-old wisdom, right? So I had to set out to find a riding instructor that was sort of part horse whisperer, part child whisperer, And because I had grown up, I mean, I did have a background as a professional trainer and dressage rider and all this thing. I was very skeptical of these like woo-woo horse whisperer types. But I found this woman named Louise Kropak. Louise, if you ever listen to this, you're amazing. And Louise, I think she's in Queensland right now, but Louise has her lesson with my daughter and her pony Pippa. And the first thing that Louise says to my daughter is, "So, Sahaja, when you want your pony to do something, how do you get her to do something?" And my daughter thinks about it for a minute, and she goes, "A carrot?" And Louise says, "Bribery and corruption." I thought, oh, this is she's saying bribery and corruption to a 6-year-old girl. And she goes about teaching my daughter about all these like really beautiful ways of connecting and getting real collaboration with a horse, right? And consensual relationship. And then Louise became, my skepticism melted, and she became my trainer too. But we sat in front of my horse Nat, who was just, really just full of trouble. And she looked at me and she said, "Well, this may not work," which was interesting, right? She's just like, if he says no and he doesn't want to go this way, we can't muscle him into it. Being together. And we just had some really powerful experiences that completely shifted the paradigm for me from power over. And, when you're in these that the overculture puts you in around power, you don't realize you're doing power over, right? You don't see it until you kind of step away and then go, "Oh, that was some really messed up stuff." And so the paradigm started to shift from power over to power with this horse. And that's pretty much the basis of which the work I do rests on, is helping leaders and teams and organizations shift that paradigm from power over to power with. So, and to have Uncle Bob alongside that journey too was really special. And then along.
And our beautiful Bob. Before we came on, I was actually, this was probably sometime in the last week, I was chatting to Auntie Barb, or Barbara, and she was talking. We had a really long conversation, and at different times she would get goosebumps, and she goes, "There we go, there's Bob. He's telling me this is important." And she would, I mean, you must have experienced this as well. And then she would really be present and really, I guess, lean into that moment. And I just got goosebumps then, and I'd already sort of set it up. I was like, in this conversation with Kelly, I want some goosebumps, thanks.
There it is. Yeah.
There's a couple of things that just, Kelly, you tell the most beautiful stories. When I was both tearing up and delighted earlier in this conversation, it was partly because I was thinking about your workshop and coaching clients, and how joyful it is to be listening to a story from you. So I can imagine that there must have been a lot of sweet times and ripple effects. You talk to the grace of horses. I just think that word and horses, to me, I feel like that through a dear friend that helped me to open up to this other sensory experience around horses.
Mm-hmm.
And you also, when you were talking about your beautiful daughter and the experience with Louise, it made me wonder about the corporate shaman that you are, as I've seen you mention on different words on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder whether you've been able to bring this truth and reality into conversations with senior leaders and leaders through the work that you've done.
Mm.
I wonder if corporate shamanism, and I would love to hear your version of that and what it means to you, I wonder if it is actually bringing through truth and love.
Yeah, it's, I deliberately, thank you. It's such a great question and opening. I deliberately chose to work with the corporate sector because, it's sort of the belly of the beast, right? I mean, they're wielding so much influence over the world and over people's lives, and yeah, the ripple effect of what corporations and large organizations can do is, I mean, we're just in it, right?
And Kelly, to add to what you just said, when I look at your site, I see Pfizer and I see a whole heap of different big brands. So yeah, you've definitely achieved,
all the biggies, right? And there was a time, because I come from my family is academics, and so academics are sort of tangential to hippies in many ways, right? Berkeley and just we are, and so it's a very free thinking family. So I really, when I was young, I used to walk around with posters on the street corner, don't pollute. Like I was a radical. I was a 12-year-old member of Earth First. I wanted to be on Greenpeace ships, and I wanted to be Julia Butterfly and live in the trees, and chain myself to trees when the bulldozers came. I was very, very much kind of in that way. And my mindset was, the corporation's bad, nature good. And as we know, those kinds of polarities are way too rigid and aren't truthful. And I, in my work in Australia, I stumbled upon the work of Ari de Goos, who wrote a book called The Living Company. And it was written in the 1950s, and he worked for Shell Oil as a senior level exec. And he posed that organizations are living systems, right? And of course they are. Of course they are. They're living systems. So if we treat them like a living system, what can we bring into their complexity that helps them to evolve, to grow, to behave like adults and not Neanderthals? What can we do for that? It's a deeply entrenched system. It's tough. There's a lot of layers and facades, and it's challenging. And one of the biggest challenges is most of those folks don't read my website. If they saw corporate shaman, they'd probably run away screaming. So I code switch my work a lot. I find language things that goes past that critical neocortex, so it can go right where it belongs. And people often leave this place, this little ranch that I have called Buffalo Spirit. You'll see some hardcore, lifelong corporate execs just crying, speechless, not able to comprehend what just happened to them. And it's as if the work just cracks that facade, and then I leave it to just do its own work. It'll dismantle itself over time in a way. And what doesn't belong to that person or that organization falls away. And something more true kind of starts to perpetuate or propagate inside of the system that, that is just more whole and more balanced. And, the other day I was in a workshop with, there's an organization, I think it's in the States only, but it's called YPO, Young Presidents Organization. And it's
out here as well.
There, yeah. And so it was a group of YPOs and senior level leaders. And one man standing, and then he just goes, the earth. I'm feeling the earth. And it's as if and I don't know what to say about it. And I know it sounds weird, but I don't know what to say about it. All I can say is this is so important, So, and I don't know what that is for him. But I do know that his body and his psyche and his spirit will not forget it. And it will positively inform his life and the trajectory of his life and the choices, because it just will. So, it's cool work, because I see the heart of the corporate world, and I see that there's a lot of potential and hope in there. And I don't know, it's just my work to do. It's just my work to do in there. And who knows? It's just, and it's not even my business ultimately happens. I mean, the world is in such crisis and chaos and disruption right now. And I don't know. I do know that disruption is the harbinger of something new, right? And something new and better. But is that a 500-year arc or a 1,000-year arc or a 12,000-year arc? I don't know.
I love hearing you talk about hope, and I also loved, as you were talking, it was reminding me of the child or the teenager that you described. How proud to sort of imagine if you could go into that 12-year-old and say, in decades to come, you'll be doing the work that will have massive ripple effects. You perhaps wouldn't have been able to describe it as it is right now.
I mean, it's funny, like when it dawned on me that I would start partnering with horses to do this work, that there was a part of me that was super resistant. And I think it's because I couldn't conceptualize what it was really like. I could only conceptualize it from where I was standing then. So many preconceived ideas about the horse world and horse, just like, oh, I won't be taken seriously if I'm working with horses. And it just didn't make sense to me. But the horses kept sort of tapping me on the shoulder and like, come on, we got to do this work together. And finally I surrendered.
And did you see other organizations offering services that inspired you, or did you create the model and the methodology from sinking into it?
I mean, horse-assisted therapy has been around for a long time, but it's therapy, and B, a lot of it is mounted in people with disabilities or whatever, or often, and then later people started bringing therapists in the mix, but I wasn't very attuned to it. And my journey with and learning to facilitate with them a little bit happened in a vacuum. And so I was not aware of that this, what's called equine assisted learning, was, blossoming. And so I sort of was taught and tutelaged by the horses and was like, wow, this is a thing. And I want to bring it forward. And then I realized, oh, there's other people doing this. And so what I thought is, I'll go to some of those folks and train with them and see what I need to learn. And by the time I'd finished my curriculum with the horses, when I went to some of these places, I realized, oh, no, it's not, for me, it's not this. And so I quickly pulled away and just started developing my own program. And what wasn't, kind of working for me is that it's very easy to turn the horse into a medicine ball and just use the horse as an object. You have to have a spiritual, in my opinion, you have to have a spiritual underpinning of understanding you are in sacred kinship with a sentient being who is highly, very likely more intelligent than you ever could be. And you can't just think that and have it as a concept. Like, you got to drop into it. And if you don't have that, then you're just using someone. It's exploitation is what it is. And I don't believe that any real thing can happen when you're exploiting another, four-legged or two-legged. So, and you know, we live in that paradigm of exploitation. So it's not like I have a lot of criticism towards folks that end up doing that, because I've been there too, and we just don't see it because it's just part of the, you know, it's part of the trans side of. But for me, I realized, I'm not learning from any of these organizations. I'm learning from the horses. They're going to be the ones who are going to teach me how to do this work with the integrity that it requires.
And tell me about the land there. Tell me about Buffalo Spirit Ranch and that aspect of the work that you do as well.
So the land is adjacent. Well, we're on the unceded lands of the Tewa people. And the Tewa people are a language group inside a larger group of what are known as the Pueblo Indians. And here in New Mexico, in northern New Mexico, they call themselves Indians. They prefer to be called Indians, not Native American. And so the Pueblo Indians are some of the most intact Native American people, because they learned to a little bit Aikido with the colonizers. And unlike many of the other Native people in North America who were completely decimated and eradicated and disappeared, the Pueblo people are very much intact. And there were 75 Pueblos. Pueblo is a Spanish word, means village, but they call themselves Pueblo Indians. There were like, I'm misquoting, but it's something like 750 Pueblos. Now there's 19. But we're on the unceded lands, and we're adjacent the Tusuki Reservation. Tusuki is a Pueblo. There's Nambe, Pewaukee, Taos. There's all these Pueblos up and down this area. Uncle Bob and Annie Barb came to visit me in New Mexico when I moved from Australia. And their way to see some of Barb's family. And they came, and this was wild. So I hadn't formally started my work with the horses. I hadn't purchased this land, but Uncle Bob and Barb came to see me, and it was as if some kind of invisible telenetwork thing opened between Uncle Bob and all the Indigenous folk around here. And there were all these meetings. No one got on the phone. These meetings happened, and these ceremonies happened, and these conversations happened. And so for the week or two, Uncle Bob was here. Like,
what a pleasure to be.
Yeah. And sometimes I was asked to stay at the door, not come in. And sometimes I was invited in because they had business and I wasn't allowed.
You're like, I don't mind.
Right? Happening. And Uncle Bob talked to my daughter's school, and he sang songs to the school. Like, it was just amazing. And in that process, I met Saya Kathy Sanchez, who's a granny for the Tusuki Pueblo, and she runs an organization called Tewa Women United. And Saya Kathy, Saya's grandmother, taught me about some of the protocols that happen here on this land. So through my connection with Uncle Bob, Kathy has become a bit of a mentor, and she taught me a few things. One, she taught me that as a white woman, it was highly disrespectful for me to name my ranch anything in the Tewa language or anything remotely associated. Like, don't do that. So Buffalo Spirit happened because my ranch manager and my ranch manager, his name is Thunder Bear. That's his name, Thunder Bear Yates. He comes from the same Pueblo that Kathy Sanchez does. And he said, what we do is we walk the land and we let the land tell us the name. And a buffalo is buried here at this ranch, and that's a whole other story, but he's buried here and his spirit is very much here. And so he came through, and the name of the ranch is Buffalo Spirit. But Kathy taught me that it was important to ask permission from the local elders if we could do the business here and run EQUUS. And so we did it. And if you're going to do that, you better be ready to listen to the answer, because she could have said, no, you can't. No. And then I better be willing to listen to that answer. Thankfully, she said yes. And that we could do the work. And she blessed all the horses, and she blessed the land. And she and the grandmothers from the Pueblos came to the land several times a year for several years, and met in circle, and just came and met and had meetings here. They don't do that so much anymore, but it was almost like they just brought all the spirits back to the land. And now it's 11 acres, so it's not a very big place. I don't know how many hectares that is, but we're not very big. But we've created a trust to give, and this was inspired by a woman in Australia named Zarna Carter, who lives in Australia. She does orthobionomy, and she gave her ranch land back to the Aboriginal people. And this moved me very much. And so in the spirit of Zarna, we have put a trust, and the trust gives half the ranch back to the Tewa people. So that's been very special. And the land it's its own living being, and it has much to give people when they come here. And so people come sometimes to work with the horses, sometimes just to be in the forest, sometimes to work with Thunder Bear and listen to his wisdom, sometimes to just be here and be in quiet and solitude. So it feels like a real privilege to be a custodian of this place while I'm here on Earth. And it tests me too. It stopped testing me a little bit lately, thank goodness. But for the first 5 years, something crazy would happen: forest fire, or $100,000 pipe explosion that needs repair, or a new well, and it's just like, oh my God. The land was like, you still want me? Are you sure you still want me? Like, yes, I do. And we'll make this happen. So it's really special.
Kelly, how do you describe life these days in terms of your own living into it? You're a natural entrepreneur, and through these beautiful experiences in life, you've created more and more openness. But how do you describe, some people talk about growing in maturity and responsibility and being able to grow into new things. When you talk about that $100,000 pipe explosion, I can only imagine the intensity at the time. But tell me, how do you describe life and the evolution for you, or the growing into life as you go?
Well, let's just take that $100,000 pipe explosion. That happened when I was out of town. So when I walked back into the house, there was that much water on the floor. I did not handle it with grace at first. At first, I picked up a stick outside, marched out to the forest, and beat the crap out of a bush and screamed my head off. And then I felt sorry for myself, because I felt like the universe was against me, and I cried and cried. But those are growing pains, right? And I love your word, growing into. I've really, really had to grow into this ever emergent invitation to be a custodian of this place, to be a custodian of my herd, to really take care of my clients and do it well and learn what that means. And I'm still learning. And I always feel like there's these bigger shoes that I'm always reaching to fill, in terms of maturity and self-awareness and accountability and responsibility, and the whole canini thing that Uncle Bob talks about. And it is canini, and it is a responsibility. And the person that I am now I mean, I laugh at the person I used to be because I was like, God, I'm so selfish and so such a jerk. So, and you know, a lot of compassion, right? Because we are who we are, and then we learn, you know, and if we're lucky, we get to learn, right? And if we're luckier still, that we take that invitation up and we do learn. So it is a growing, and I feel like a lot of times, and myself included, there's a part of us that sort of says, oh no, I could never do that. Like, I could never have an 11-acre ranch with a barn and a herd of 8 horses and, you know, and find the means to repair $100,000 pipe explosion. Like, I could never do that in a million years, but you can. Like the I could never is because you're answering it from the old you or the now you. But the you in a week is going to have so much more capacity and so much more possibility than you even could conceptualize now as this person. And so, you know, I realize, like, I speak from a certain amount of privilege because I am a white woman in America. And whatever it is that one feels called to do, whether it's something that seems very small and intimate and private, or whether it's something that seems like really big, both require you to step into that next iteration of yourself, right? And to trust that, and to allow yourself to be shapeshifted. And it is painful and scary, for sure. It's not like, oh, I just found the way.
Kelly is so real. I love the truth that just pours out of you. And I also, sorry, go ahead.
I swear like a sailor. And I think it's part of how I manage, because I just let these words rip out of my mouth because I like another fucking growth opportunity. I'm sorry if I say that. You can bleep it out if you can. But it allows me to just enough grit and playfulness to kind of like do it, you know?
Oh.
So, yeah.
Well, and actually, as we were talking at the start, the lightness of Uncle Bob is possibly part of the, I want to say grace again, but part of the way that he could carry himself with so much heaviness around him. I think it's so apt right now for all of the heaviness that we can go into and observe in this ever-changing world we're in, and to hold that lightness of being and to pass it on to others is just, it's just so golden.
You know, he said something that is echoed by Thunder Bear when Thunder Bear talks, and he gives a lot of talks to people who come here. Thunder Bear says, you know, our spirituality isn't our spirituality, it's for everyone. And Uncle Bob's generosity to share, you know, great criticism, I think, at times, information with those of us that have an Aboriginal heart, right? That we can, even if our skin is white, that he feels, no, I can give this to you. And that generosity is, well, then we just want to keep passing it on, right? Sharing it, and so that it can grow and take root in all the places. And there is that lightness of being, but also, like, you know, Uncle Bob never hesitated to cry. He never hesitated to be angry about something. And that, you know, just being with someone who was just him, he was just human. He was a human being, yeah, incredibly special. And the paradox of like a human being with all the humanness was also a teaching, you know.
And back to what we were talking about with you always reaching for bigger shoes or shoes to fit into, maybe that's part of the answer to the question that I was asking about growing into things in life, or how you perceive life at the moment. That's so sweet what you just said. It's like we are all here with our humanness, and we're growing into those spaces in ourselves. And you just made me very grateful that the name of this podcast is Natural Genius, because it is actually expanding into those areas. Yeah. And I also want to acknowledge you and appreciate the nuances that your clients are lucky enough to be. Talk about privileged at senior levels of organisations in the world. And then they get to work with you, Kelly, with the nuance that you can pull through. That is how lucky senior leaders are. Similar to you, I've worked in corporates and large organisations around the world, and that maturity or that responsibility and that privilege that comes in those senior leadership roles I wouldn't have, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have understood what you meant if you'd said that to me.
Yeah. And also speaking of privilege, there is a price to the privilege that a lot of people have. There's an incredible price. And there was a moment with Uncle Bob where we're in an airport somewhere, and he's doing his thing where we're having coffee, and he's still talking about all his teachings, and it's all just happening. And yet we're in this cafe, and all these people are starting to swirl around us in the airport because it was early in the morning. And so more and more and more people are starting to swirl, on their Bluetooth and with their briefcase, and then they're and the haste and the rigidity and the just the shut downness and the siloedness. And Uncle Bob's telling this heart-wrenching story about how when someone dies in his culture, the name is not mentioned anymore because they've merged with something so sacred. And he's crying. He's just crying. His napkin on the table is wet. He's crying. And I'm seeing the juxtaposition of this like ancient one in front of me, and this story, and this like world that thinks it has its crap together, right? And I start crying, and because this is so poignant and beautiful and real, and this, whatever this is just insanity. And he looks up and he goes, are you, he puts his hand towards me, he goes, are you crying for my people? I was so embarrassed because I was like, I said, Uncle Bob, I really don't mean this in disrespect, but I'm crying for mine. And he was like, for a moment, I just saw a little like glimmer of like, what? and then I said, hear me out, because you've lost everything, and but you know what you've lost. Like, you remember what you lost. We don't know what we lost. That's how lost we are. And then he really got it. He was like, oh, the whole thing's a tragedy. The whole thing's beautiful, like unbearably beautiful. Life is unspeakably, unbearably beautiful and magical. And it is so tragic. Go figure.
I've started more and more to think about life as a mosaic, that we all come in and connect and create the mosaic in Kelly's life and in Sam's life. And I think a beautiful furry friend just arrived in their life as well. What is the name of your dog that's just arrived?
Well, he's reminding me that it is dinner time.
Yeah, exactly. We better wrap this up.
But
I was just going to say that you helped me to fill out my mosaic thinking in my mind. It's now a three-dimensional. Like, as you say, there's so much beauty, and we can look at life through so many different lenses. And as it expands out, and I'm so grateful for this conversation, for the many different learnings that I've had through it and insight, the mosaic can come three-dimensional and four-dimensional and fifth and all the rest of it. There's always more nuances to gain. You are an absolute treat. I'm so appreciative of time together.
Yeah, Sam, I do a lot of these, and it's rare to be with someone who just holds a kind of space where things can come forth. It's a gift. So I'm really glad you're doing this podcast, and thank you so much for the privilege of being able to be with you and allow things to come forward. It's really beautiful. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much for your time, and a big thank you to our dear Uncle Bob and Auntie Barb as well.
Absolutely. And if people want to find out more, they can just go to equisinspired.com. There's just a bunch of stuff there. And thank you, Sam. Thanks so much for everything.
Thanks for listening to the Natural Genius podcast. Please share this with anyone who came to mind, and visit us at naturalgenius.com.au. Thanks so much.